All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webinar today, Upskilling, the Enterprise DevOps Skills Report Results. I'd like to take a few minutes just to let everyone know a few things up top. One, we can take questions. But as soon as you think of anything, please put it right into the question panel. If we don't get to them on the air, we can always take them after the fact offline. Two, we are recording. So if you have a colleague who's unable to join, or perhaps you have to leave early, we will be able to revisit this recording very soon. Moving on from here, you can see the slide up here is that CloudBees, who's putting on this webinar with the help of DevOps Institute, always partnered together at DevOps World Jenkins World with some sessions and workshops and the whole 9 yards. So if you'd like to join us, I'm going to be putting a link in the chat for where you can find information and register, as well as a code for 20% off your registration. Now, before I introduce our speakers, I just want to take a quick note and let everyone know that, we here at CloudBees are obviously really passionate about providing the best DevOps solutions to allow you to achieve that kind of DevOps culture within your enterprise. And we're really excited to sponsor this survey because it really shows that the importance for both developers and managers to have the right skills that allow them to meet their business objectives and give their customers what they need when they need it, and just to improve their career overall by having better access to these tools and skills. So we're going to learn a bit about what the survey told us in regards to those topics. So next slide, please. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today, both from the DevOps Institute. We have Jane Grohl, the CEO, and Evelyn Orlick, a research director. I'll let them talk a bit more about themselves as well. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Jane. Jane, you want to take us from here?
Hi, Max. Hi, Evelyn. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Very excited to share the results of this important community project based on the survey that we had launched last year. We have a really strong relationship with CloudBees, and CloudBees has always been a tremendous supporter of the work of the DevOps Institute as a member-based association. But their sponsorship of the Upskilling Enterprise DevOps Survey, Enterprise Skills Survey and Report was really appreciated because it did help us reach into the community to those that participated in the survey and hopefully those that will download the resulting report. So very appreciative of our partnership with CloudBees, very excited about the opportunity to share some of those results with you today. So hi, Evelyn.
Hello, Jane. I guess it is my turn. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And also thank you, Max, for the great introduction. Evelyn Ehrlich, Research Director, was majorly responsible for the work here, of course, with Jane. When I wanted to give this a little bit more backdrop, when Jane and I met last year at DAS in London, we looked at each other and said, how about if we do something together? The next conversation was, how about if we do something together on skills? And here we are, almost a year later. We didn't start until October because we had some other things to do in between. So let's get started and see what we have here for you. And again, as Max said, please make sure you give us your questions. Here is another slide about the DevOps Institute. If you don't know the DevOps Institute, it's time to know what that is. Again, here are the links. Please go there. There's some great stuff and the report is there as well. All right. Before we get into the details of the skills survey and the findings, I wanted to give you a little bit backdrop, and you'll find this is quite important. First, a little bit on transformation history. If you look into where we are today, but where we come from, you can see some trends. So first, second, third revolution, some of us might have been around, the revolution of steam and water and power and electronics, and then IT. Much of that improved the quality of our life. We have governments and companies which flourished. The second one, of course, this is a major step, right? The next one, digital revolution, where we're in right now. We have the cloud, the starting out of cloud, IoT. Here we have experienced and are experiencing the speed and the quality of services and software, and of course, all for a much better customer experience. And then the fourth revolution, or Industry 4.0, as we call it in Europe, all about AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, advanced working in a different way we work, we see ourselves work in a different way, and the experience of the society is changing. And we can see that already in some organizations and some governments, and maybe within ourselves as well. So what does that mean? Employment trends worldwide, and this is when you look at the source from the World Economic Forum in 2019, which was held just a few hours from where I am, south of here. I actually come to you from Germany. Global workforce is changing. There are some socioeconomic drivers which are very important. There is the nature of work is changing. I, for example, work from home. There is an aging workforce. There is a lot of middle class emerging. And then technological drivers. I don't need to tell you, as many of you are in technology, mobile internet, cloud, etc., etc. There's also a trend which the skill stability. The first one, as the business models are changing, that causes a significant disruption in the skill sets out there. And the technology we have, and you probably feel it just like I do, is shortening the employee's shelf life of existing skills. Now, the good news is there are, if we look at the survey results here, again, done by the World Economic Forum, when they were asking about what are some of the future work strategies, there is a lot of investment in reskilling into current employees. So 65% said, hey, we're going to invest in our current employees, which is fantastic. But if we go to the next slide, there is also some challenges, and the challenges are there are significant resource constraints because, again, organizations don't have enough people to do the work which are needed in these different topics. Like I said, cloud, IoT, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if we look at DevOps, the good news here that in 2019, DevOps is a position or a trade, I'm going to call it a trade at this point, is in hot demand, which is great news for all of us. Here, Glassdoor says that it is the top 10 notable tech role in demand, and Robert Half Institute says it's the 7th most wanted professional, which is fantastic. If you go at the report and look at our report, you can see the source, and there are some more details in there. All right, now some details from our survey. The race certainly is on for DevOps hiring because, as you can see here, when we ask the question, what steps is your organization taking or planning to take to expand the DevOps teams, 37% are currently hiring. There are still folks who are planned to recruit in the next 12 months, and there are folks, as you can see here, who don't know or have no plans to hire. Potentially competitive pressure of their within the company or their institutions or their organizations might change that. We are planning to do this survey year over year. So next year we'll do this again, and I am betting that these numbers look very, very different. Now, the most popular title when we asked folks who and what they're recruiting for was the DevOps engineer or the DevOps manager. However, you can see here there is a whole set of development jobs and other jobs which are certainly just as important. You see the role of software engineer, the DevOps consultant, the test engineer, the automation architect, and of course some of the newer ones, site reliability engineer, which is something also very interesting that we saw 10% are hiring for this one. But the DevOps engineer certainly is the one which was the most popular title to hire into. Now, before we go any further, I want to hand it over to Jane because she has some great T-shaped details to share with you. Jane?
Hi. So, you know, there's definitely an evolution, not only in the skills that are needed, but the approach that individuals and organizations are taking to the the roles that they're creating. And so there's definitely a movement towards something called T-shaping. So I've been in IT a very, very long time, and I've had an opportunity to watch IT evolve from the days of the mainframe or the single environment into the complex multi-domain, cloud domain environments of today. And we grew IT as an organization of specialists. And that's some of the challenges that we face today, that we are very much not only a siloed organization, but we're an organization of specialists that have their own tools, their own vocabulary, their own methods of working, and the handoffs downstream from, say, software engineering all the way through to production often is constrained by the fact that the skills are very, very specific to a silo or a team or a competency. So in the digital age, there's much more of an emphasis on T-shaped professionals. T-shaped professional has a core competency, maybe more than one core competency, so you could become pie-shaped or cone-shaped. We won't get there today, but the stem of the T is your deep knowledge about a core competency. I am a software engineer. That would be the stem of my T. But the top of the T needs to be really looked at as your enhanced knowledge, broad-based range of skills, general knowledge that you might have about a variety of other competencies and disciplines. So if I'm a software engineer in the new age, I'm a test-driven software engineer. So I know just enough about testing so that I can write test cases from the very beginning. I can perform certain tests. I can contribute to automated or continuous testing because I have just enough knowledge about testing or about infrastructure or about coding or about site reliability engineering or about a myriad of other skills that are very, very important as we start to make these multidimensional squads. So we're moving far away from the day of the I-shaped specialist, and the roles that are in the highest demand and the professionals that are in the highest demand. I listen to a lot of presentations and have an opportunity to interact with enterprises. They are very much hiring T-shaped people. The problem is we all know what our STEM is. How do you know what to fill the top of your T with? And that's something I think as we dive deeper into the data from this report, hopefully, depending on what your core role is, you may get some good ideas in terms of how to fill the top of your T.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you, Jane. All right. Let's have a look at when we started the survey. Of course, we needed to organize ourselves relative to what categories of skills we wanted to dive into further. So we defined 4 categories. We all know soft skills are important. Process skills or frameworks, second, then technical skills and functional know-how. So around those 4 categories, we designed specific questions which we then put in our survey and asked. And really, when we go back to what Jane was just saying, when I saw her presenting that in London last year, I was absolutely curious, and also listening to the audience, they were fantastically moved by what she said. But there was always that next click, and we said, what if we could have the data to really, truly give us the ideas of how do we actually fill out that top? Now, important to know is that there is knowledge, there is skill, and there is ability. So if you look at the definition here, knowledge is the practical and or theoretical understanding of a topic, and you can obtain that through learning, training, and experience. Where skill are things that one learns through training or through experience and obtained again as you learn or practice, practicing your skill. And we've heard that from our parents or from our teachers. And then the ability is the level of being able to perform or do and deliver a task. The ability is a little bit different because that's actually obtained through something natural. So some people have the ability to be very detailed oriented, to be analytical, to be problem solving. For myself, I'm an IT ops person and I'm also a DBA, but I also was a developer. So my natural ability was problem solving, and I made that ability to my profession as I became a systems analyst and then moved into an operations role. Today, as an analyst, my problem solving and my analytical skill, of course, help me. So let's get further into the details in terms of our demographics. We had fantastic response. More than 1,600 respondents to our survey across different regions of the world. So you can see here, North America, Europe, Latin America, India, APAC, and China. It is a little difficult to get some responses from some countries more than others, and you can see that reflection here, and that's very typical in the research. Now, we also wanted to share with you the participants, just to make sure that you know we had a really good mix of company sizes and roles. On the left-hand side, you see the roles. We had C-levels and management, but we also had team leads, individual contributors, and we had some contractors and a few human resources. On the total company revenue and the employee size, we had also a very good mix. So truly enterprise, end to end, we have a pretty good coverage. Looking into who are the ones who actually responded, on the right-hand side, you can see that there is just about as many 8 application development folks and operations folks, which we're very proud of because we wanted to make sure we had that DevOps balance. You also can see there are some folks on the business team and across some of the functional areas, such as the Office of the CIO or CTO. I felt it was important, and Jane agreed with me, this is on the left-hand side. We wanted to also have a good representation of the environment. So organizations and technology teams who have already been doing DevOps and have very hybrid environment, some which are maybe just modern, and then some who also had legacy, because in all of those environments, DevOps, and we found in our survey, and you see this in the report, that there is prevalence of DevOps in all these environments. It's not just in modern, and it's not just in very modern environments. So that was also great news for us to hear. All right, as I am from Colorado, actually from Germany, but lived in Colorado many years, we're descending a mountain today. We're getting further into detail. Make sure that you have some questions for us at the end. Wanted to encourage you again. So one of the important findings, of course, was the state of these survey respondent organizations we surveyed. What's the current state of the DevOps adoption? 19% said that they are doing DevOps at the enterprise levels. Congratulations to those who are there. Of course, also very important, there are 34% who do DevOps on a project level. And then there's 15% who are still in the planning stage, and 11% are in planning to do and adopt DevOps in the future. Again, year over year, as we're doing this, again, we'll see this shift probably more into project level, less on planning stage, and less on in the future. And that's to be expected with the necessity of DevOps making organizations successful. All right, remember the categories we had. So we said, all right, the first thing to do is to find out what are the top must-have categories, organizations, and folks in our survey group thought of to be important. And again, you could see the coloring here is throughout the slides the same. So we asked the question, how would you rate the importance of the following categories of skills for your DevOps team member? The very important or must-have is the blue, the important is the orange, and then optional, not important, was the gray. And here, absolutely, automation skills, having the ability to know how to automate was the #1 category everybody said. Now, you probably are rolling your eyes and going, okay, Evelyn, that's nothing new. I knew this already. Well, maybe you did. We have some more further click down details on that, so stay tuned. Second important was process skills and the knowledge of how to actually disseminate processes. And those two, automation skills and process skills, go really hand in hand, because understanding and knowing what the process looks like end to end or specific key sub processes allows us to then start automating it. As one of my former colleagues used to say, be the automator, not the automated. And that is very true in this case. Third, soft skills. very important category here. Everybody, 53% thinks that soft skills are a must-have category, where there were 42 said it's nice to have and 5% optional. And then the rest of them you can see for yourself. I don't want to go too much into deep depth here because we have so much more details in the next slides relative to these categories. All right, Jane, let's move to the next. Now, before we go into the further details of each category, we felt that it was important to look at the differences amongst our different roles. And we clustered them into 3 groups, of course, the C-suite, that's CIO, CEO, CTO, and then management suite or management level. Those are the managers, VPs, leaders of teams, and then individual contributors who actually do the work. And here we found some differences relative to some of those particular areas. The first one, as I highlighted here, automation skills. Quite interesting to know and to see that the C-suite sees the automation skills as a must-have category, by far much more than the leaders and VPs or the individual contributors. So that was quite interesting. Second, business skills. If you look at here, the C-suite and to some extent management agree more so than the individual contributor that business skills are important must-have skills. And then last but not least, the soft skills, also 69% of the C-suite said very important must-have skill, were 55% in management and only 44% in the individual contributor. Now, the fourth one, I'll let Jane comment on the specific certifications because we found some differences there as well. Jane?
So that was, we found that really very fascinating. So certainly certifications in DevOps is evolving. And as you may or may not know, DevOps Institute certifies 7 certifications around skills in DevOps, but it hasn't actually, I think, reached into either the C-suite or the individual contributor. I thought it was really fascinating that there's a bump at the management layer, right? So management layer and C-suite, pretty close in their perception of that. Maybe they're unaware that there's certifications available, but the management layer is likely going to be the hiring manager. And so I think we see the bump of 2% upwards from the management layer from even the C-suite, because when they start to look at talent and start to review curriculum vitae or resumes, the certifications may be a differentiator. I'm really fascinated, Evelyn, to see if next year these numbers change, but it's one of the few times that we actually see a rise at the management level compared to the C-suite or to the individual contributor. And I said, I sort of suspect it's because the management layer is also going to be the hiring layer. Let's see what next year shows us.
Yeah, very well. All right. As I promised, further details. Next click, we are furthering our trip down the mountain. Let's look at process skills in details. So again, same color scheme with the very important or must-have skills in blue and the nice-to-have in orange and the not so important or optional in gray. So for many of you who are here, most likely developers, software development lifecycle skill is absolutely #1 must-have skill. So if you have that, I'm assuming you do, 46% said that's a very important skill. Second, understanding of process flow and analysis. Again, as we are setting out to reduce waste in DevOps, with applying DevOps, we want to make sure that we understand how to do that. And that is a very important skill to have. Analyzing these processes, understanding how can we actually reduce some of the waste and feedback to somebody before or whatever to do that. 45% also very high. Experience with source control models and processes. That one surprised me a little bit. Again, as I already unveiled myself as an IT ops person, of course, this would be an opportunity for me to actually get much more familiar with the source control models and processes relative to as I'm not as comfortable. But for you as developers, that probably is something quite open and familiar. Agile, not a surprise at all. And then the experience with the test-driven deployment concepts and methods, also very important to recognize that this is came in as a very high. And then system thinking. Now this one is very nice to see that show up here, because again, system thinking, I've done many courses myself and taught some workshops there, creates a different way of how we approach it. And seeing that at 39% as a must-have was fantastic. Now I wanted to point, Jane, hold on a second. I want to point out something, and then I'll give you a chance to comment. Couple of things which were surprising to us were the low must-have in program management and project management experience. And again, as we move on in time, as we have potentially a year-over-year data, this might change. But again, there was significant high nice to have, but not as much on the must-have skill. Jane, comments from you?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so if you kind of look at the first 5 to 6 categories, what I find really fascinating is that our respondents population really almost split, not quite equally, but close to equally between developers and operations folks. But really that first kind of 6 levels really speaks to, I would think, more of the developer. And I think from my interpretation, it's because we are all going to be developers, right? So operations folks, even though they have a domain experience, with everything being code now, with everything being tested now, understanding the end-to-end software development lifecycle doesn't mean that operations folks are not necessarily included here, or understanding process flow or understanding agile. I think this is where we start to see the crossroads of cross-pollination of knowledge between operators and developers, because otherwise I think the split would be a little bit different. So I think there's a really strong message here, is that if you're a developer, there are some skills that you need to acquire, particularly in systems thinking and looking at source control models, and particularly with test. And if you're an operator, understanding that the software development lifecycle, understanding process flow, understanding agile becomes important as well. So I'm really interested, again, to see what year over year, if we start to see that we're all engineers approach.
Great. Thank you, Jane. Soft skills. Now we saw soft skills was very high in general as a category. Let's look a little bit deeper into what soft skills are actually must-have. To not really as a surprise, but still as a surprise that came in so high, is the collaboration and cooperation. Now we do know DevOps has that key sharing, right? If you believe in comms or other models, sharing is a very important part. But collaboration and cooperation is something which is absolutely rated very, very high here. Problem solving, second one, also very important, with a very high number believe that that's a must-have skill. And again, as we try to reduce waste and increase our scope into looking at the areas where we're trying to solve, problem solving in itself becomes very important. Interpersonal skills, having through the ability to actually collaborate and cooperate, of course, we do need to have interpersonal skills. Sharing and knowledge transfer, both within the group, externally to other functions, within the business team to the business team, which allows us to actually transfer ourselves into the continuous development of what we're trying to do. Being flexible and adaptable, also very high. Of course, as speed and velocity is a very important thing, having that flexibility of doing and working in different groups, potentially maybe shifting to another team for a while, being a coach for somebody in the next project, being somebody who is an individual contributor, all fits in here. Personal value, commitment, and creativity. An interesting thing here was also the empathy and customer experience skills. Now, there's a little more details on the soft skills relative to the different roles, but customer experience skills, of course, is absolutely important as we are thinking about the digital experience and the digital transformations or the digital business in general, because really what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that what we deliver is with quality and the speed and the velocity, so that our customers or our clients or our patients, depending on where you work, are continuously having a positive experience with our company. And that is very, very important. On the bottom part, you see here risk-taking, not as big of a must-have skill, but certainly a nice-to-have skill. We were a bit surprised by that, but certainly something which I think, Jane, you wanted to highlight some details here on that one.
So, and I know when we get a little further down, we'll talk a little bit about governance, risk, and compliance. You know, there are organizations that are first trying to figure out what experimenting in DevOps looks like, right? So we encourage experimentation, you know, kind of taking a scientific method approach to innovation. And when you start working in smaller increments, that's a little easier. You know, it'll be, again, interesting year over year to see whether risk-taking rises up as something that organizations are comfortable with, particularly organizations that have strong compliance or regulations that they have to meet in order to continue doing business. So again, nice to have, absolutely, very, very strong, nice to have at 60%. But it'll be interesting to see if the concept of experimentation on a small, you know, less risky level starts to emerge year over year. It's an interesting twist, right? Of climbing down the mountain as we're looking at these soft skills. We all know soft skills are important, but you know, you start to look down, and some of it, you know, again, yeah, we all know we have to collaborate a little bit better, and we have to communicate a little better, and we have to be good at problem solving. But I think this data is really insightful in confirming that it isn't a nice to have, it's a must have. Yep. And that's going to differentiate, I think, those that can really grow their careers and those that really need to perhaps work on some of those skills. Look at the differences. I'm looking forward to your explanation, particularly of customer experience.
Yes, so here again, we broke down the different soft skills relative to the different groups. And again, you can see the first two line items, collaboration, interpersonal skills, pretty much similar, even interpersonal skills, 62% on the individual contributors. All right, but the next one is quite interesting. Customer experience skills. The C-suite in your company truly thinks that that is a must-have, much more so than the individual contributors. So if you are an individual contributor today and you don't have understanding about customer experience, get out of your chair, go walk over to your customer experience folks, those who are measured and monitoring it and knowing about it, and talk to them. Management, same, pretty much the same number. So those two, leadership, of course, things, because many times they're incented and that's important for them. And that is very, very good to see for me, because I've been studying customer experience for quite a while. So this is beautiful, but lots of work to do on the individual contributor side. Creativity is also something. So trying new things, as Jane was saying, is valued, and that's really beautiful. I mean, my IT career started in 1994. If I tried new things at that time, it wasn't very highly appreciated, I have to say. But today, absolutely, because creativity allows us to really play around and understand what's possible. So management and C-suite is really thinking that that's a must-have skill. So that's beautiful. And then flexibility and adaptability. Maybe as the only German optimist, I want to say, individual contributors, you have the opportunity here to be more flexible and adaptable. The C-level and the management is actually giving you the ticket here, saying that that's a must-have skill. And it goes back to, again, how and where you are and what role you are today, with the possibility to be adaptable in your role and how you do your job, and potentially flexible in taking on duties you might not necessarily do. So shifting from a QA position to something more of a development position, shifting from a operations team maybe more into a QA team, or vice versa. Whatever is really makes you better is what gives you this gives you actually the opportunity. Jane, anything else you want to add here?
No, I mean, I think you covered it really, really well. I think when we look at this next slide and we dive even a little bit deeper into the soft skills, we really start to see where everything, the creativity, we start to look at flexibility and how that really kind of resonates, even increases when we start to look at things like sharing and knowledge transfer, which is such a core DevOps value.
Excellent. And you can see here again much more must-have rating by the leads and the management. So there's great opportunities for you to think in and through your soft skills, your abilities you have to be more empathetic, to be improving your sharing and knowledge transfer, and doing some problem solving. So I think, again, you can look at these, and the slides are available, of course, for you to in more detail. All right, I think the next category, before we go there, I wanted to also make sure we understand the topologies or the makeup of those organizations we surveyed. So you can see here we have a variety of categories or topologies, and there's some great research out there. We asked the question of how is your DevOps organization today organized? And you can see 24% say it's a cross-functional team distributed among different IT teams and business units. That's the most, let's call it, popular. And the second one here on a project-by-project base via DevOps services teams. And in my experience as an analyst in my previous life and work, that's very much resonated with the enterprises and organizations I advised and consulted. So let's look at another category of skills. It feels a little bit like at the Oscars. Unfortunately, I missed the Oscars this year because in Germany it was very hard to watch. The functional skills. This one is very interesting because it shows us a very good mix of what functional skills are must-have, and it's really a very equal balance, pretty much equal balance between IT operations people, maybe a little bit more, but IT operations folks, infrastructure folks, security practice people, and application development people mixed in with QA and testing. And that, in my previous work, again, we talked a lot about the product team. A product team is comprised of these different functional folks who all together, one or many, work on either project level or forward in the enterprise. Now, the confirmation, and we love this, and we really loved seeing the security practice to come in at such a high must-have skill. You've seen, I'm sure, been at events or watched another webinars. The DevSecOps topic is starting to become very important because we can no longer ignore security. And many of you, if you already have the DevSecOps practice and you have done work in that space, congratulations, compliments to you. Absolutely the right decision. And here again, we see at the lowest level, still DB and SQL knowledge, not as much of a must-have. There are some reasons for that. And as a DBA, I'm a bit disappointed, but as we move into the new technologies, that might not be as much of a must-have. But governance, risk, and audits, I think, also at a low must-have, but still at a very high nice-to-have, with 58% seeing that as a must-have, as a nice-to-have skill. Jane, do you want to add something here?
Yeah, sure. So, we talked a little bit about T-shaped, right? So security, regardless of whatever your role is, if you're looking to add something to the top of your T, I would absolutely encourage security, developing some good core broad knowledge about security practices and DevSecOps. Absolutely. Database is fascinating to me because there's an emerging set of practices on data ops. And so I think that the transformation of how data is captured and what DBAs may be doing in the future, I think is evolving as well, particularly with, things like machine analytics and really starting at how do you start to look at AI and where does AI get the data from, right? So I think that'll be interesting to see year over year. And for me, also kind of going back to the top of the T, testing knowledge. We know that testing is very pervasive across the pipeline, the CI/CD pipeline. And so again, regardless of what your role is, whether you're dev or ops or security, I think everybody is going to need to learn to test. And I think 31% is a must-have skill is fascinating because, again, in the past, it was something that was a downstream activity mostly relegated to QA teams. QA teams still exist, database administrators still exist, but like everyone, they also need to now become T-shaped. And I think a lot of this functional skill detail is supporting that.
That makes me think of, Jane, we did some work around, and many might have heard left shifting a variety of activities. So when you were describing your T, sometimes having your I, but on the top where you might feel comfortable, you could actually left shift some of your skills into a particular area. And testing is one of those things. When we left shift into testing, the work we do, and because we have the knowledge and because we understand some of it and work with those folks, we can actually avoid a variety of things downstream. So that's also very important.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, technical skills, of course, important, a very important category. I don't think there is any surprise, drum beats here or drum roll on cloud platform and cloud environment knowledge with 55%. And then from here on down, a lot of things which is important. Analytical knowledge, as Jane said, having the knowledge of analyzing either data or processes is key. Experience with UI, user interface, web and mobile, and middle tier, whatever environment you're in. And again, here are some opportunities for both sides, right? For the development folks to actually go much more into understanding cloud and analytical, very difficult word for me to say. And then for the operations folks among you who are today not necessarily that rounded on the technical side, specific frameworks, and then of course working knowledge with mobility in the mobile environment. As we become much more mobile and mobile environment becomes more important, that at 19%. Still, I want to point out a couple more things here. The mainframe knowledge is still here. When I started, again, as I said, in IT in 94, it was already said that the mainframe will die. Well, we're now still here, and it's 2019, and the mainframe is still here. There is a lot of activity on the DevOps front in the mainframe space, as we know, because those things are still a critical key piece to hybrid environments. So still 11%. And then artificial intelligence, basic knowledge. That one was a surprise to me, as the adoption of artificial intelligence and machine learning certainly seems like everybody is doing it if we believe the press and the news, but as a skill, it is still not yet a must-have, but a nice-to-have. And this probably depends very much on the verticals. We didn't do the slicing and dicing of the verticals. We'll plan that for next time, next research round, but certainly something, if you are in a particular vertical and that's key, something nice to have, but not yet seen as a must-have. All right, now we get to the tools. Now, earlier we saw automation tools. Actually, the C-level and management actually felt that it was important and a must-have skill to have certain capabilities across a key set of tools. And we decided that we wanted to understand what are some of the know-how tools to know. And we created a question asking, what is your first or second tool you think your new DevOps person should have some know-how in? I wanted to just make sure that you know that this is not a branding exercise, so please don't tweet about this. It is really just a list of what are some of the vendors which are there to know, and they are organized in alphabetical order. This first one is the continuous integration automation, and you can see here CloudBees is of course mentioned. So that's the first list. The second list is, if we go to the next one, is about the continuous delivery and release automation, some work I've done quite some significant studies in my previous life. And again, you can see here CloudBees as a vendor to have some know-how in. And again, much of these automation tools, as I said earlier, management and C-level actually felt that it was important to have skills in these. And as we think of our confirmation that certification is important, being certified in these vendors, if it's possible, and having the training and going and visiting events, if those are the things you can do, that's of course very important and very good. So we are almost at the bottom of the mountain. We've got 13 minutes left. I wanted to leave you with some conclusions and then maybe hand it over to Jane for some of her departing words, I guess, and then you get a chance to ask some questions. So as conclusions, while functional and technical skills are important, we've seen they're not enough. You have to have additional skills, and particularly on the soft skills, some work to do. Apologize. Understanding how to actually positively impact customer experience is very critical to your leaders and should be critical to you, no matter in what role you are today, no matter what industry you're in. Even in government, I'll say that on purpose, customer experience, or in this case, citizen experience, is very important, because once you have lost that touch, we don't have a reason to exist, truly. Practice and polish your soft skills every day. And again, I sometimes, I have two daughters at the university, both of them in the United States. I always ask them about polishing their soft skills. And I'm actually using this survey to give to them and say, guys, ladies, here is something for you to think through. That can be done in small teams, having continuous feedback back to you. How am I doing? Ask questions to those who you work with. How am I doing? Can you give me some constructive feedback and some constructive criticism so that I can work and improve? As we saw, functional skills within DevOps are important. I talked about the product team, so IT operations in conjunction with AD&D, security, quality, and testing together certainly make up the DevOps journey and the DevOps team. Automation skills we saw as the #1 skill category, but you must understand what, when, and how to automate. And I call that intelligent automation, because I've seen situations and enterprises who have automated, but they actually haven't done it intelligently, and they ended up with the same mess as they were in before. Then all the automation doesn't help you. If you automate a mess, what you get is a mess. Now, a couple of interesting things, which if you are more interested in that, again, I would highly recommend looking at the report. Companies are cultivating DevOps teams from within, which is absolutely beautiful. So there is your chance today, no matter what role you're in, even if you are in an organization where you're thinking, oh, I don't have a lot of things to offer, do step up to the plate and share. Let your management know that you are interested in expanding your skills, expanding your functions and your capabilities relative to DevOps, because you are being looked after and thought after if you have and possess some of those skills. And as Jane said, be expandable. And there's some interesting research about an expandable mindset by a professor in Stanford, again, that is mentioned in our report. Be expandable and challenge yourself to become T-shaped. And from T-shaped, there are multiple other shapes Jane alluded to, and that truly makes you a very competitive individual. And of course, those who are in leadership positions who are listening to us, if you're a CIO, CTO, any C-level management or leaders, challenge your team also to that expandability to shift from the I to the T-shape individual. or as Jane likes to call it, the DevOps human. I really love that, Jane, when you say that.
The humans of DevOps. Absolutely. So thank you, Evelyn. I mean, without your deep data science and analysis capability, this report would not be possible. So very much want to thank you for explaining the results of the data. The data comes from the community, so I think that makes it particularly relevant. I think your ability to analyze the data, to craft a survey, first of all, that really gave us the kind of insight that we got in the report, and then being able to share some insight on the results has been invaluable. So appreciate that as well. So, you know, at DevOps Institute, we are about the humans of DevOps. And so read the report, right? It's available for free. You can download it from the DevOps Institute website, the CloudBees website. There's a lot of good insight that's supplemented with some interviews with recruiting agencies and some enterprise leaders. So there's just a lot of really good direction or guidance depending on where you are today. Be interesting in terms of where you are tomorrow. So I really hope you'll do that. I also hope you'll join our free and open continuous learning community at devopsinstitute.com. There's a lot of opportunities to engage, and certainly some continuous learning content there as well as part of our member association. Okay, so with that, I thought, let's turn it over to Max. Max, do we have any questions?
We do. We've gotten some really good ones. Let's see. One of these we did touch on at the end, but I kind of want to bring it back. Out of the tools that you were showing, do you feel that there are any in particular that are going to be not more important, but are going to be very important for people to learn in the short term when getting into the DevOps space?
Yeah, I remember that question from my analyst time at my previous company. It really depends on where you stand in your journey. It's not like there is a recipe to say, okay, you must learn French when you go to France, you must learn Italian when you go to Italy, and you must speak German when you go to Germany. Some of us speak all three, like myself, but not to brag, but it's really hard to say. It depends on where you are. It depends on where and what you're doing. It depends on the scope of your project, and it depends on your budget. It depends on what you already have in house, right? It really is a very difficult question to ask or to answer at this point in time. I mean, obviously, CloudBees is certainly one. As we are here with CloudBees, I would recommend to go down that path for sure. And then as an internal analyst, or as an analyst forever, go look at some of the analyst reports and look at the leaders and look at the challengers as well in terms of these tools. These reports give you a good idea of what are some of the most advanced and most innovative and most breadth and depth of solutions out there, and where there is customer satisfaction and the right price value. Those, I would say, are the key critical criterias, and then ask around those who are in your company already. If you're the only one applying a particular tool, well, it might not be the right tool. If you're the only one speaking German and nobody else speaks German, there's no reason to speak it.
And if you don't mind my just jumping in on that, I think everything you said is absolutely true. The survey told us something very interesting. It said automation skills was a top skill, right? So knowing how, when, and what to automate is a top skill. And I think when we start to look at platforms like Jenkins, which has a ton of plugins that can be added to it, right, then how you apply your automation skills to specific tools is something that you carry over from tool to tool to tool to tool. So my recommendation would be learn about automation architecture, learn about CI/CD pipelines, look at a platform upon which to build your foundation, and then take those same skills and apply it to the specific tools that you can use within your architecture that'll make your architecture stronger, better, faster, and certainly with high quality. So that would just be my recommendation there.
Beautiful. I love that. You should do a blog on that, Jane.
Yeah, on my airplane.
There you go.
There you go. Max, what other questions do you have for us?
All right, we have a few. I'm wondering if I can combine some of these into one big question. So there's two coming up, and I think that they can kind of go hand in hand. One, the simple question is, well, simple if that's what you want to call it, is what is the scope of DevOps for the future? And then someone got a little bit more in depth, which I like, which is how do I, as a DevOps engineer, keep the T-shaped focus from getting out of control? There's so many tools, so many different methods, so many different things to learn. At what point, how thin should people feel about spreading themselves across these platforms?
I think that's a CEO question, Jane.
So, I think it's a really great question. I think the concept of T-shaping could be overwhelming because, the range of things that you could learn is infinite, and the range of things that you should learn is sometimes hard to identify. So, as Evelyn said, I think it's where you are today, right? So if you're a software engineer, certainly we know that testing is an important skill to add, and we know that security is an important skill to add because both of those are as code, and also both of those are shifting way to the left, so that the goal is to start testing and to start in really embedding security from first lines of code. So if you're a software engineer, I think that's important too. If you're an infrastructure engineer, certainly I think you need to learn to code and test because everything's code. But the bigger, broader part of the question is, what do you fill the top of your tea with? So like Evelyn, I'll use an analogy. My daughter's an artist, and so her primary medium is paint. But she's described T-shaping as, I need to know enough about other mediums in case I want to add them to my painting, or in case I want to be able to explore a different competency. So if you think of it in the same way, kind of like it's a craft, right? It's a craft, and if your primary craft is really only singularly focused on a single area, how do you take that craft and go to the next level? And hopefully that helps you to identify what your next level looks like, right? So again, you can't be all things to all people. That's why we start to call them squads, right? If you think of the definition of a squad, military squad, is that you have a lot of cross-functionality within the squad. You have people that have deep skill about a competency, and then you look around your squad to figure out what other things you should fill the top of your tea. The good news is the tea is infinite, right? So you could add security and testing now, and then next year you kind of look and said, hey, wait a minute, I don't know enough about CI/CD. I don't know enough about AI. I don't know enough about any of these new and rising topics, and you should do that. So I'll kind of wrap up, and I know we're running out of time. It's a great day to be in IT because you are actually encouraged to be a continuous learner. Just realize you can't learn everything in a day. So as Evelyn said, it's a journey. So figure out what's going to give you the biggest value today in terms of what your job is today. Don't worry about the tools. I mean, tools are great, but I think the survey really helped us understand that functional skills, automation skills, soft skills, right? Really look at those as part of the top of your tea as well. Find a platform like Jenkins, and then little by little start to groom the best practices around security and automation and CI/CD, because you could take that to any tool.
All right, thank you. So we're at the top of the hour. I just want to do one more quick question, but then be respectful of everyone's time and end this. Just so everyone knows, once I close this session, there's actually going to be a very short survey, basically just asking what you'd like to learn about in the future. But Jane and Evelyn, one more. If I'm an application operation person whose job is to install and upgrade enterprise applications, however, I don't have any development experience, can I still try to be a DevOps engineer?
Oh, yeah, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that is a longer conversation. And if you want to chat with me, you see my Twitter handle was at the beginning at ehrlich, or my email is ehrliche@devopsinstitute.com. Happy to talk to you and chat and connect. But absolutely, I mean, the short answer is yes.
And I would look at site reliability engineering. I think, you said that earlier when we looked at the jobs. I think we're going to see a rapid rise in that, particularly on the operational side. And I think there's some skills that are emerging in SRE, not the least of which is some basic coding capabilities. I'm an operations person. I don't know how to code, but I'm learning now. I think that when we start to look at SRE, it's going to help to provide at least a little direction in terms of what roles like this should focus on.
All right, we do have a few more. I'll make sure to get the questions out offline to everyone. And just so everyone knows, I did put my email in the chat. So if we didn't get to your question, please feel free to email me. We'll get you an answer. That said, we're just over the top of the hour. I'd like to close this out and let everyone get back along with their day. We hope you enjoyed this. Keep an eye out for that survey coming up in just a moment. Jane and Evelyn, do you have any last items you want to mention before we sign off?
No, have a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Download the report. There's
Yes.
so much good data. No, there's so much good data that we were only really able to kind of touch the very, very top of it. So I really hope that it contributes value to the DevOps community.
Absolutely. I did put a link to that in the chat, and we'll include that in our follow-up email as well.
Good.
So we'll be talking to you all again real soon. Recording will come out with the link to the report, and I hope you all learned something. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Evelyn.
Thank you all. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye, guys.